Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How's it? Well, I was going to say, how's everybody doing? But I can get a sense it's a Tuesday morning of a trade show. Thank you all for coming. I know it was a pretty short walk from wherever you started to however we got here. So I appreciate the quick saunter. My name is Tarik Small. I am part of Spinnaker SCA. We were thinking about taglines for what we're going to get into, which is how to rip and replace a WES. It is intended to be a bit tongue-in-cheek. I think there is a joke we were playing with. I'm not going to deliver the joke as is, but there's really kind of two folks in here. Well, maybe three. There may be those that know Spinnaker and just want to connect with us. There are those that have actually done a replacement of a WES or a CS with some complicated automation, and there may be a bit of trauma there. And then there are those that are thinking about it and maybe have had at least one conversation with someone who has, and they want to unpack that a little more. So regardless of the reason, again, we are happy you're here. I'll get into it. So really, I won't read off the slide. There's three of us. My name is Tarik Small again. I'm in our execution practice. We are Spinnaker SCA, boutique consulting company focusing on process, strategy, and implementation. My focus happens to be distribution. So for me, that's four-wall, that's warehouse management, that's labor, that is automation. With me are Nixel and Jason Dill. They are part of our warehouse automation and optimization team. So think facility design, rack, build, anything that actually involves, I'll say, Tetrising the four walls of a warehouse. And together we just make things flow a bit better. I'll go next. So I'm going to pass this off to Nixel. Really, the goal of this is to get into what to think about with a WES. We've had this conversation. One of the themes that we are going with for the trade show is just this idea, again, as small as the trade show, ProMat and Modex tend to be, we want to synthesize it a little bit, make it a little simpler for people to navigate. And so thematically, this is our attempt to help make another decision that people are making a little easier and just illustrating that. So Christian's going to start getting into the what, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Tarik. All right. So let's see. Before we get into the actual what of a WCS and a WES and the re-implementation or the removal and replacement of them, I wanted to talk a little bit about orchestration versus automation. Seems to be a little bit a couple of words that are used quite a bit and often interchangeably and probably not in the right context. So I wanted to kind of set the baseline of what we mean by orchestration and what we mean by automation. So when you think about automation is really getting the task done. It's the execution of, I need to do a certain activity. I need to move a box from A to B. I need to fill a box and pick it from a pick wall or put away something. There's the automation that's involved to complete a task. It's very linear, and it's usually designed to be very efficient in that linear process. It usually goes by some kind of fixed rules that you set up ahead of time so that when this situation is encountered with the machinery or whatever kind of material handling equipment you're using, it follows that set of instruction and accomplishes the task. But when we look at orchestration takes it up a level, where the automation is pretty linear, getting from point A to point B, what we call scaling out, get the stuff done, get it out. Orchestration is really looking across the whole facility and taking into account all the resources, all of your automation resources, the human resource that you have in the facility as well, the work that needs to be done, understanding what the bottlenecks are, those pinch points are, and coming up with the right flow and the scalable flow, a dynamic flow to adjust accordingly and have all that automation and the human resource level execute the work in the most optimized manner. When you think about orchestration and automation, automation could be looked at when you address needs for automation. It could be looked at putting more workers on a line or putting more equipment on a line. And orchestration is that manager that steps back and goes, okay, here's all my resources. How do I put that combination together today to get what I need today in the best manner possible? So let's talk about a WCS. WCSs have been around a while. They're really an integrated real-time control type system over your automation devices. Can be conveyors, sorters, robots, foot walls, pack walls, those kind of things. They do real-time communication and real-time execution. They communicate usually up to a WMS above them, warehouse management system. And then they communicate downstream to a PLC layer. I'll have a diagram a little bit further down that'll illustrate that a little bit better. But they communicate down and give that machine instruction to your automation layers. There are some limitations that come with a warehouse control system. So first of all, they typically don't interface to your ERP, what's above the WMS. Your order management systems, any kind of your planning or financial systems, that WCS normally doesn't go up to that level. Usually doesn't hard allocate the inventory. That hard allocation typically comes from your WMS, and then the WMS tells the WCS what has to happen with it. Normally doesn't support the wave management strategies. Again, that's typically done at the WMS level. It's really not your inventory of record. Kind of the golden rule is that the WMS is the book of record for your inventory. Doesn't support an extensive cycle counting process for physical inventory. It can. I've seen it done. It's not very clean. It's not very elegant, but typically it's not designed to do that. Doesn't normally support labor management and allocation of resources in terms of the human resource. And it really doesn't support transportation planning and shipping execution. By contrast to WES, it really optimizes the workflow in the facility. It's looking at what's going on, taking a real-time pulse of what's going on, and then making adjustments accordingly into what equipment should be used, when it should be used, what kind of flow should be going through that. When we look at the capabilities of a WES and what they don't do, they really don't manage all the inventory within the four walls of your facility. They can manage a lot of it, but there's still some of these manual processes that have to take place in the facility that the WMS is typically going to handle. It does not support extensive cycle counting and physical inventory processes. Again, it can to some degree, but it's not really designed for that. And it, again, like the WCS, it doesn't support the transportation planning or the shipping execution. When we look at the areas that a WMS typically covers, transportation management integration, order management integration, advanced receiving, management reporting, reverse put away, slotting. When we come in with a WES, we can see that the WES can pick up some of the functionality of a WMS, like the replenishment, parcel manifesting, the non-automated picks, voice data capture, inventory management. But then on the right side there, it's getting more into the electromechanical side, where it's doing sorter management, shipping sorter, pack sorter management, shipping sorter management, pick to light, those kind of things. And then your traditional WCS is really on that far side where it's working with the scanners, your machine control, any kind of your print apply solutions, your scales, and those kind of things. So if we start at the top on this architecture, we look at the very top is what we call the strategic layer. That's our ERP. We're going to have a little bit of alphabet soup here. ERP is your enterprise resource planning tool. And really that's where your big picture decision-making is taking place. Your finance, your procurement, your planning, your orders. That next level down then is the WMS and some of its edge apps. Like you can have a TMS, you can have a labor plugged into the side of that, other web service calls, those kind of things. That's really that managerial layer. We're at what we would call that warehouse command center. When we get down to the WES is picking up some of that functionality from the WMS and starting to bridge that gap that goes down to the machine level of control. That's really the monitoring and supervisory layer. Then we have a WCS that usually rests under a WES. In some instances, you don't need that WCS layer, but when you come up with different automation solutions, be it robotics or other types of sorters, conveyors, carousels, et cetera, often it works better to have that particular solution's WCS be the layer up to the WES. And then at the execution layer, where the physical moving of items takes place, the visual side, the scanning, the diverts, those kind of things, that's at that execution layer. Okay, I've covered really what the what is of these systems. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jason Dill and have him start talking about the how and the who that's involved with these systems. Jason?
So thanks, Christian. So Christian went over, the what's involved, and now we're going to kind of get into, well, who is that, and who are the folks that are involved. So typically, there's 3 pillars here, and basically most of you at the show kind of probably live in one of these pillars. There's the operations side of things. Folks here at the show, I know you get a chance to see some of the user interfaces and some of the day in the life of someone from the operations side who actually operate the day-to-day and execute the plans through the day and are very tactical. And those operations folks are looking at, what's in it for me? What does my day entail and look like with the new systems and the new processes? And then you have the technology side, where this is typically the IT department who looks at, what do I need to have in place to actually go through the rip and replace? Is it new servers on-prem? Is it in the cloud? What's my security look like? And what do I need to do to get ready so that we can do the implementation? And then you have the engineering side or the facility side, which typically look at, do I need to run HVAC? Do I need to run another power point in the plant to get these things in place? And then from there, you look into what it takes from who's involved. Now it's kind of like, from the next step here, the how. So typically you look at the phases of a successful implementation. There's a planning phase followed by some design and development, followed by a build and learn phase. And that's followed by the implementation and the go live and hypercare support that follow. So I'll go into each one of these here in a little more detail to give you guys an idea of what's involved. So again, I'm not going to read these word for word, and I see people taking pictures. If you want, here at the end, we'll have a barcode. You can pick up this slide deck, so it might be a little easier on you as well. But from a planning aspect here, you're looking at the requirements of the actual system, what system's doing what. As Christian explained here, who's doing what. As you can see, the ES, CS, and MS kind of lay over each other. So, you're planning on how to integrate these systems and make it so that, we have a reasonable plan in place. It's a reasonable timeline. Sometimes it's followed a tactical plan by a strategical plan, meaning that, some of the robotics and automation you're going to put in are, might take a couple of years to get in, whereas the first year is more tactical and you're looking at laying that foundation level layer so that you have the systems in place that can incorporate these robotics and the future automation in your facility. So from a planning aspect here, you kind of want a reasonable plan. Again, we don't try to boil the ocean or, eat an elephant, in one bite. It takes some planning and some key decisions here up front. And one thing you got to make sure that you really look into as well is you have the right teams involved, from a core team to an executive leadership team, so you can make decisions throughout the process. And that plan's really in place so that, we have reasonable expectations along the line, and we can make sure the vendors are held accountable as well as the individuals on the internal team. From there, you can see some of the key deliverables here, on this one. Of course, project plans, first one, but you can read through these here and kind of get a glimpse of what some of these might look like. And again, we'll pass this deck out here at the end. So next one here, you kind of get into the design and development. So this here is when you bring in all the vendors you're utilizing for this particular process. Again, if you have ES, CS, MS, it might be 3 vendors, it might be 1 vendor. Just depends on who you're looking at to support. If you're going on with one integrator, or if you're planning across multiple integrators because you have a current tier 1 WMS and you're trying to add some robotics and automation to that one layer, you might not need a WMS. You might just do the CS and ES. So some of the key deliverables here from design is who's doing what operations and processes within the facility. Again, the ES can do picking, for example, so can the MS. So from that perspective, you have to define who's doing what, and then from there, get a concrete design moving forward so you can develop that design and make sure that it's integrated correctly moving down the process. From there, the testing integration plan. Testing integration, very important here. I've just on a project 3 months ago, and they skipped testing, and their thought process was, well, if it's base, it should work. Well, if you've done this, base does not work. You need to test. So from a testing aspect, typically you got about 4 phases there. The first phase being the just the unit testing within the 4 walls of each application. From there, you look at the integration role and integrating that and talking amongst systems from the MS, ES, and CS perspective. And then from there, you typically have a user acceptance test. This is where your people become knowledgeable and you get to train and they get to learn how these systems are going to work for them in the future. And then from there, you typically want to do field testing to see how it runs and integrates with not only the people and the process and the technology, but also the facility. And that's a key role. You want to make sure that it's tested throughout the entire process, and operations readiness testing or field acceptance testing is done, and it's properly done. And from there, you kind of get into the go, no-go decisions, and are we ready to turn this on, and are we ready to make that commitment and move forward? And then from there, we go into the final phase here, which is your go live. And I'm going to let Tarik take over here and kind of talk about some go lives he's done here and some things that he's learned through the years.
Yeah, so I think the things we want to call out at go live, many people, if we've all experienced a go live, it's a feedback me. If we've all experienced a go live, we treat it generally like the end, especially when you've had some of these very complex 4-wall implementations and you get to the end and all you want to do is stop. And I think what gets missed, if I don't say anything else, is actually validating that the end actually was doing what we expected to do at the beginning. And especially when we're getting to things, highly automated facilities, when we have multiple systems that must then integrate and connect with multiple systems. Again, our KPIs should have been defined earlier. Is it doing what we expect it to do? And then from there, how do we keep ourselves accountable and what's next? So it's kind of like commencement, right? They say when you graduate, it's actually the beginning and it's not the end. I feel like a lot of us, myself included, have treated a go live as the end of the road to then transition to something else. But really, ideally, that is the beginning of a process of continuous improvement. We are doing it idealistically. That's what we believe. So coming out of that, one of the things that I think is also important, and again, I said this in the beginning, but I maybe didn't double down on this. The idea of ripping and replacing a WES is hard, right? And so as you're kind of getting into this, there may be someone in the room that's thinking, well, we are thinking about doing that, or we are in the process of doing that. What exactly should we consider? And I think really as an organization, I'll say as someone who is taking on that burden, really it should be, well, how equipped am I to do this, right? And I think one thing we don't do, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to skip ahead for a second. One thing we do in life, but we don't quite do it at work, is actually ask of others. I'm in Chicago. There's a ton of places to eat, I don't know, an Italian beef. I've actually not yet had an Italian beef in Chicago as many times as I've been here. For me to figure out where I should be having an Italian beef sandwich, I probably should ask someone. I think when we get into these moments where we have these very, again, complex implementations, we don't actually take the time to ask others who have been in there. Maybe there's a point there around people and vulnerability and exposing the business to others who may not be in your circle. But I think it is helpful, not just getting recommendations from your solution providers, who obviously can give you references, but actually talking to people in the space. And one other thing I will mention while we're at least on the slide, we talk about a WMS and a WCS and a WES like they're all the same thing. Like it's just different variations of an apple. When I think in reality, even within a single acronym, like a WES from, I'll say solution provider A may not actually have the same capabilities as a WES from solution provider B. Cabins on an aircraft is the same example. You will have a seat, but a first class cabin is distinctly different than an economy, and even slightly different than comfort. And so I think understanding that nuance is important. Again, we are equipped to do that, and we are happy to guide anyone who would like to understand that. But just be aware and just make sure you guys are getting educated in whatever ways it is important to you to actually understand that. Couple case studies. I'm not going to actually go through the case studies, just really the takeaways. Regardless of what you read on the slide, the important takeaway here is actually that we helped a very large client with an implementation, and in the process of that journey, realized that the WES was responsible for more than everyone in the room, or in this case, the facility, thought it was. So as we were thinking about removing part of it, there were implications to other systems that were not considered. And so again, in whatever way, we don't just rely on the vendor, but we rely on each other. No one knows your business better than you. And I know that sounds really basic, but a lot of times when we're in the room with a lot of people, we tend to trust the person that is asking the question, when in fact, we probably have more of the answers than we think we do. And the other one is a children's retailer. And so just, again, understanding the takeaway here is really that the process of going through a WES, CS, or even WMS transformation is very simply that it is a journey. And I think make sure that you are prepared for the journey in the same way you're prepared for a road trip, in the same way you're prepared for a long flight. Whatever you can do to actually just understand that nothing will happen quickly, and there may be some pain, but again, this is work worth doing, especially if it solves a business problem. So key takeaways. Again, I said it before, we cannot simply just say that we're going to rip and replace a WES. We really are focused at Spinnaker SCA of doing the analysis to what we say is measure twice, cut once, and make sure that we are equipped to go on that journey, and not just to plan for the journey, but also work alongside our solution providers and our clients to make sure that this is a success. I think Jason said it earlier. If you guys scan that QR code, you will get a copy of the implementation checklist. So I'll leave that up there. The next thing to note, I talked about thematically, we're trying to make this trade show this year as simple as possible for those that are interested in very specific things. So we do have guided show floor tours. I'm going to flip the slide. Once I think everyone has a shot, we can get it later. So if anyone would like a guided show floor tour, we are open to actually, for whatever you are trying to solve. So we have warehouse management system tours. We have automation tours, and we also have WES focused tours. So scan the QR code for more information. Also connect with us at our booth. We would be happy to guide you through that. And now I tried to speak quickly enough that there could be space for questions. So any questions? Someone's going to help me, I think, with a mic, maybe.